Okay, where is it? Okay. Hello, folks, and welcome back. To the first ever podcast between, as you can see, my lovely, what's the word? Not assistant, but cohort. Cohort.
Yeah, yeah. Your core. I suppose that would be accurate.
But the main
Podcast.
subject we are talking about today is uh, about people that are. Do you want to open this up at what we're talking about here today, Krystal? Because I feel like you would be more knowledgeable of what we're talking about today.
Well, so if we're talking about disappearances in national parks. If the viewers are interested or are aware of a man named David Paulides, then you may, if you know of him, then you're familiar with what we're about to talk about. If you're not familiar with his work, I think you would be very interested. I think anybody really would be interested to have some insight into what he has discovered. There's some very, very, very mysterious disappearances that have happened over the course of decades. I mean, this has been happening for 60 years, and it is consistently happening with national park, very you know remote places that, I mean, it's not that people don't go there. They're national parks. People go there to hike and camp, but you're not surrounded by people. And when these people disappear, they disappear in ways that forensic science cannot explain.
Yes.
And that is the topic of our podcast, is what's up with that?
And I'm just saying, I have studied some of these. I have thoroughly watched some of these David Paulides interviews. And I tell you what, Paulides just takes over the interviews. Like he just dives in and doesn't let the interviewer ask him questions. He just says what's on his mind, and a lot of the things that he talks about, just the way the person went missing, and how they just went out randomly one day and they disappeared, just randomly up and disappeared, and just whew,
Well, David Paulides himself is a very reputable man. He's not some crackpot conspiracy theorist. He is a retired police officer. He actually worked as a detective, and so he has knowledge of how, if you find a body, if you see a crime scene, if there is a disappearance, that there are these things that we can expect to find. And even a common person who's watched any kind of true crime show or Forensic Files or Dateline, and most people have, there are certain questions that you're going to ask naturally, and these pieces of evidence that lead us to perpetrators, oh, this was the murderer, they are not present in these cases. And one of those, one that strikes me, is very memorable in my mind, is of a young girl in a Colorado national park. She was 14. I believe this was in the mid 80s. And a 14-year-old, doesn't just wander off and go missing on a hiking trail so easily. I mean, this is a capable teenage person. She didn't have special needs. And she left her family to go down a hill where they could see her the entire time. They watched her go down the hill to take pictures with a camera that she had. And as she starts to come back, she's walked down, she went to the left, and she starts to come up through a line of pines. There were some pine trees along the edge of this river, and she's walking back through the pine trees to return, and she never comes out the other side. Just that simple. And so, I mean, her family they were watching her the entire time. So when they can't find her, that in of itself is, how is that possible? And then when the police come to investigate her disappearance, they find nothing of her for miles and miles. We're talking about helicopters, talking about dogs for weeks, searching miles and miles of area around the spot where she essentially vanished. And all they found of her was a lens cap to her camera.
That's insane.
It's insane. How do you explain that? How do you explain that?
You
And that's
don't,
just
and you don't.
current.
You can't explain this phenomenon that is often encouraging. That it's like, where is this person at? Where did this person go to? And I am, oh my gosh, but hopefully people can still hear me because apparently my internet is crap right now because I'm looking at my stream and
I can hear you just fine. I don't know if the listeners can, but I can hear you just fine.
I'm so flustered right now because I want this podcast to be good and like my internet's so stupid. Oh my gosh, I want to hit my head and I want to throw my head into a wall right. Yeah, it's frozen. It's absolutely frozen.
Well, if I can hear you,
Oh.
we're talking about helicopters.
Oh, they can hear us. They can hear us, but the stream is just absolutely frozen.
I see. Well, that's okay.
And
I
I kind of scooted your image away, and I kind of have a picture of me and you in the background, so hopefully that might correct it. I don't know.
well, that's fine. I mean, I think that's fine. I've listened to plenty of podcasts where I didn't see images, so that's okay. If these things happen, maybe we can work out the bugs later.
Yeah,
But
my internet is so stupid. Like honestly, I pay
sometimes I think that's the thing with the internet. We hate to love it and love to hate it kind of thing.
there was one kid. There was one case. His name was Dennis. Like I can't remember his last name.
Yeah, Dennis. Now I forget as well.
But he was
But
a
that
young boy, and I think around the age of 2, I think, or 6.
he was 6. He was 6, and this was in 1969.
1969.
There's some that 1969. So that's how long this has been going on.
Yeah. Since 1969, folks, people have been disappearing in state parks. And it's truly mind-boggling on what's going on in this situation. And truly, it just blows you away. Like, it just, wow.
And it's not very I mean, it's very interesting. It really is very, very interesting. But it isn't. It's not a very happy thought. I mean, for me personally, hiking and camping and being in the woods and going to national parks is something that I love to do. And after learning of this, uh, it has made me afraid, and that's kind of it's disappointing, it's disheartening, it's kind of sad because going into the middle of the woods in a national park or whatever, I would think, well, the only thing that I have to be afraid of is a bear or a mountain lion, this physical thing that I could possibly ward off with a weapon. But now you have something, this invisible force that nobody can explain, and that nobody is willing to explain or attempt to explain, that is something to be feared. And David Paulides, in one of his YouTube, I don't know what to call it, I don't want to say it's like a TED Talk, but it is similar, I suppose, to a TED Talk. But he's speaking about having contacted a major Colorado state park to ask for the files, the case files for these missing persons. And these cases are 10, 20 years old. And this one particular person, this man that he was in contact with, flatly refused to give him these case files, and they are a matter of public record at that point. They are not it's not under investigation. They are closed cases. It was a matter of public record, and this man would not give him the information. He refused. And even after David Paulides got in contact with his superior, the superior said, yeah, you want it so bad, it'll cost you $1 million. That's really what he said. And it was an absurd thing to say. And I think, if I were to take a guess, that it wasn't so much that it actually was going to cost $1 million. It was just his way of saying, there's no way you're getting this.
No, and I think right there is just cruel and unusual to hide this information from the parents of these victims. That, and Paulides is obviously not doing this to try to do it in some vindictive way. He's trying to comfort the families and tell these stories about these people that have just disappeared off the face of the planet. And he's trying to tell those stories, but our government somehow is saying, basically, no, you cannot tell their stories. You need to be quiet. These stories don't need to be out there. But Paulides, it's obviously no one's threatening Paulides and telling him to be quiet, because he's produced books. There is a movie called, what's it called, Krystal?
It's called Missing 411. It was on Netflix for a long time. It's not on Netflix anymore. But yeah, it's called Missing 411. You could probably watch it for $1.99 on YouTube. There's plenty of free YouTube, talking about Missing 411, David Paulides speaking. And he is very in-depth man. He really does not leave any stone unturned.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't. He's very, very credible man.
He really goes into the details of how these, and one of the interesting things about these missing cases is whenever they're searching, when there's people that has been found, they're miles and miles and miles away. That people, Paulides has talked about cases where people have been found, but obviously the person is confused and they're dazed and they don't know what to.
Unfortunately, the rare event that they are found alive, which is very rare. A lot of times they're not found at all. And when they are found, it's under just the strangest circumstances. I mean, there was, I can recall several stories of his where there'd be like a family or a group on a tour, on a hiking tour. And there was a young child, no more than 10 years old, who was in the back. They were the caboose of the line of this hiking trip. And literally this child's parent or older sibling turns around, having just saw them moments ago, to find them gone. Poof. Just gone. And so obviously the first thing anybody's going to imagine is, I guess they ran off. Well, in a matter of seconds, how far can a person go? Not far. You're going to hear them. You're going to be able to call their name. You're going to hear footsteps. And this child was absolutely gone. Vanished.
Just poof.
And when they found the boy, he was miles and miles away.
They found him?
I believe that was one that they did find.
But if you notice, when they say they find the kid, he's face down and not looking at anything. And his shoes, his clothing will be a distance from him. Mm-hmm. But, you don't.
Some cases, the clothing is found separate from them. Sometimes only clothing is found and not the body. And other times, there is the boy that was with his father, I believe, only about 3 years old, again, on a trail. His clothes and his shoes were found, and the shoes did not have not a mark on them. And again, miles and miles away. So if a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old, how many miles are they really going to walk anyway? Certainly not, 3 to 5 miles away from where they were missing. That's a long way for an adult to walk through mountains, let alone a 3-year-old. And when his clothing and his shoes were found, his shoes they looked just like the day that he put them on. They didn't have scuff marks. They weren't covered in mud. They weren't tattered. And the police even said themselves, if this boy had really walked this far, his shoes would be covered in mud. And they weren't. And the boy was never found again.
Yeah, that was the case where the father that was in the missing 411 movie.
Yes.
Some friends had picked up his son. That was his only child, and they took him down to the walk through the park, the state park, on this trail system. It leads to a state park, and the kid runs ahead, and they go to catch up with him, but he's not there. He's just vanished. They don't know where he is, but hundreds of miles away, all the way up on top of this gorge, on this mountain, is his jacket.
Now it wasn't hundreds of miles, but it was a long way. It was several miles, which is just a very long way for anybody to walk, let alone a 3-year-old, and then to only find clothes in the shoes again looks like brand new, and you have to consider too that when the clothes and the shoes were found, this was weeks later, after so many search parties. Again, dogs, helicopters. This is what people, this is usually what police will do when somebody is missing, and to that extent, especially a child, and nobody finds a thing except for that. And it does beg the question. David Paulides is an interesting man for a lot of reasons, but one of those reasons is that he refuses to say officially in his books, in his films, regardless, refuses to say out loud what he thinks is going on.
Now I would like to. This is a theory of mine. Can I throw my theory out? Because I really think my theory is something that is instrumental to this subject. I think this is true. It may sound crazy, and Paulides doesn't want to say it, but I want to say it. Like, I don't care if people say I'm crazy, but I think this is real. I think what is going on here is they are portals, and there is another dimension that are opening up, and these children are being grabbed, are falling into something. Random portals are just opening up, and explaining the clothes situation, I think the clothes are being stripped off of these victims and placed in different places, so it throws it off. And it's like...
See, and I think that's in theory, and I do think that it is something supernatural. It's something that is that could maybe very well possibly understood by our government, CIA, whatever, shadow government, whatever you want to say. And that is not a conspiracy. That is, I think that there's just an incredible amount of evidence to support that world government has quite a lot of knowledge that they're not sharing with the public. And there's quite a lot of knowledge that they don't want us to have. And I think that you almost have to be blind to refute that. So based on that, I think that it could be a lot of things that are supernatural. Now, the portal thing, on the surface, that does make a lot of sense. But I do wonder, why would, if a doorway to another dimension were to open, which I don't think by any means is impossible, it would seem to be random to us. Now, it would probably follow some kind of pattern in nature, the way that everything in nature does follow a type of pattern. But to us, it would seem a little bit random at first. It wouldn't just pop open for this one person when nobody else is around to see it. Just to turn around and see somebody and then look forward, and then to look behind you again 15 seconds later and they're vanished. That's if it was an interdimensional portal, why would it be so precisely at that moment when nobody was looking?
So one of the stories I heard from David Paulides, he was explaining that his hunter was walking through a state park, and as he's coming up the gorge, he comes across a wall, but it looks like fog, but he puts his foot into it, and then he pulls his foot out, and immediately he kind of looks around, he's kind of confused, and then he turns around and just walks down the mountain. And I'm like, portal, 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 portal! That's a portal that supersized itself and made itself look like...
But something, so imagine this. You have, I mean, this vast amount of land, right? I mean, this is just the forest. This is just the earth. There's no telling how many square miles you're talking about. And that portal opens up right directly in front of this one person. Why didn't it open up over there, over here, or 12 miles away? It opens up right in front of this person. And it leads me to believe that whatever is happening with some kind of intention. That something, whether it be supernatural, whether it be alien, whether it be a spirit, whether it be the government. I mean, I know that kind of sounds crazy, but I don't know. All that we know, based on what you and I have seen, and what anybody would see if they watch what we've watched, brass tacks fact is that that regular forensic, FBI police work does not provide an explanation. So it is something that we are not familiar with. And in these cases, the government, like with the case with the dentist boy that happened in 1969, the same thing happened. His father looks around and the boy is gone. And he looks for not very long until he goes and tells his friend, it's Father's Day weekend.
Shout out to the super chat, by the way. Sorry.
That's cool. To go get the authorities, to go get the park rangers. Because he knows right away that his 6-year-old boy is not going to run that far away from him.
No, he's not.
So he asks for help immediately. And then he continues his search. Well, when the park rangers get there, he tells them what happened. And as they're searching, approximately 5 miles away is another family.
Called the Key family.
The Key family, that's right. And they saw a figure. Now, the figure in this case is interesting to me because it reminds me of something else, another work that, another situation that David Paulides was involved in called Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh.
And I don't know if you're familiar with that, if you see anything about that.
Bits and pieces of it. You told me about it. I checked it out, and weird sporadic things happen apparently at that ranch where cows have been skinned and just things have disappeared randomly.
Yeah, it was very strange, and the figure that the Key family reported seeing, they said it was not a bear, it was not a mountain lion, because it stood upright, but it was covered in hair. Now then this goes back to like the Yeti lore, which a lot of very professional people, David Attenborough, strongly believes in the probability of this thing's existence. The strange thing to me isn't so much that the Yeti exists, but how could it have this supernatural quality? What would it want if it's supernatural, which I wouldn't think that it would be supernatural. It's just a thing. It's just a missing link, and it's in remote places, and every now and then people see it, and that's why in remote places in the world, this, in places in Nepal, in India, in places like that, Nepal was a big one, where in these mountains, generations upon generations of people would tell the story of having seen uh, what they believe to be a Yeti, or seeing footprints. But what would indicate that creature has some supernatural ability to snatch people out of thin air? But it's very, very bizarre, and it's very eerie. I personally don't really want to believe it, even though there's so much evidence to support that there is something to it.
Yes.
In Walker Ranch, there were creatures that were sighted. It actually frightened the family so much. This family had bought this home on the ranch because they were farmers, so they intended to grow livestock and grow corn and things like that. They left. They just left the place.
And apparently the government has taken over that ranch, and they have sealed it off, and no one can go on it because of all the stuff, all the weird occurrences that have happened on this ranch. Shout out to the super chat, $4.99. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I don't know you, but thank you anyway. Yeah, and why that place? It does beg the question, is there a portal of some sort that just so happens to be alive and well at Skinwalker Ranch? Now that does make a bit of sense to me, and it's kind of funny when it's almost like Stranger Things, right? Yeah. There's the door, and then in this world there's a different
upside down world. It's everything is weird, and you have to ask yourself, are these missing people in this world, and is there something either keeping them or doing experiments on these people, or devouring them and then dropping their skeletons back in our world where they find bones and stuff like that. I looked on Google Images about this stuff, and I saw pictures of shoes laid out on Google Images, skeletons, skulls, human skulls just laying in piles. And this leads to the theory that, if people say, and now this may make me sound more crazy, if there are aliens out there, I believe, here's the other part where people are going to think I'm really crazy, that aliens are not in space. Aliens are here on Earth, and they are here in another dimension, and they are swiping people, children, adults, and they're in, and this makes me sound crazy, and people say, I've had millions of tweets where people tweeted at me and say, it's called sex trades, Tommy. Well, here's the thing. A predator is not just going to go out to a state park and then target a kid. You would see the adult or the predator.
Even if a child predator did go out to a national park and think, hey, I could snatch a kid, nobody would know. There's going to be footprints.
Yes.
People are going to see this person.
Yes.
They're going to hear a scream. There is nothing of that nature that is occurring here. It is a silent vanishing. There's no more footprints. There's no leads. It's it. That's it. But at the same time, the government, the local governments involved, which obviously, they have higher ups and they have higher ups. So all government really leads to federal government in the end. So the government in general is not willing to release information about this. In the case of Dennis and his family in 1969, that was Smoky Park, by the way.
Yes.
That was Smoky National Park. That it was right on the skirts of North Carolina and Tennessee. That's where that occurred.
Insane. That part.
That's particularly frightening because it's right here. I mean, that is our backyard right there.
That is our backyard. My question is, I've been tempted to, it'd be risky, but me and you, to honestly, if we put the money together, me and you go to some of these state parks and try to.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
You wouldn't do that?
I am legitimately too afraid to do that at this point. I would go to a supposed haunted house or some abandoned insane asylum. I would do that. But at this point, I'm not kidding. when I say that I am legitimately too intimidated by what I've learned to feel safe doing that. I mean,
So
when
even
these
going to the
people,
place where Dennis disappeared, where possibly locating that place where he disappeared and looking at that area would intimidate you?
yes, because he went missing in broad daylight with a group of people around him. And adults have gone missing in groups of people with other people around them. So for you and me alone to go there, um, I don't know. It actually does frighten me enough. And I don't scare easily. You know, I love to travel. I go to a lot of places, just me and my daughter. I don't feel insecure about not having an escort. I don't feel bad about going downtown here and there and here and there by myself. But that legitimately does intimidate me.
I'll say this. I went to a state park and I went to Wakava, I think Wakava or Watava.
Oh, yeah, Catawba
I
Falls,
went
yeah.
to Catawba Falls. That's a state park. I asked my parents, "Is this a state park?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I looked at my nephew and I'm like, "Keep an eye on him, please." And they're like, "Why, Tommy?" And I'm like, "Because I've watched some documentaries about state parks and a
Yeah,
lot of
people
people go
on the
missing."
surface are not going to believe you. They're not going to believe you on the surface, but they would if they've watched what we watched. They would. Because
I was trying to talk to my father and trying to convince him to watch this, but maybe at some point I can get my mom to watch it. But like I really want my
they
relative.
cold case files. Do they like Dateline? Do they like forensic files? Have they ever watched stuff like that?
Kind of. And here's the thing. What got me into this? Honestly, what got me into like looking into this and you telling me about David Polias. I found out about David Polias because of Krystal, because she told me about Polias. I had watched a show on television about disappearing cases, people disappearing and stuff like that. One was about a woman that disappeared, like sporadically. She was on television and she disappeared. And then the next one was about a little 2-year-old boy that went up with his parents to a state park. And this one is very controversial because the parents have been accused of possibly murdering the child, which they have been trying to fight for years to prove their innocence, to prove that they didn't do anything wrong.
Now, and that one is a bit different. That one made headlines, I think, because the authorities thought they had somebody to pin it on, and they will do that. I mean, I like a lot of things, and lately I've been watching the confession tapes that's on Netflix. If anybody's interested, and it's about how police can coerce confessions from people under hours and hours and hours of interrogation, even when they're innocent. So I think this one made headlines because people thought, oh, there's someone that we can pin it on. It was them. They had something to do with it. Well, I don't think they did, but I think it's funny that that's the only one that really got.
No, they didn't.
I don't think they did, and I don't think it's a coincidence that that is the case. They got the most news coverage because when there is no perp, there's no evidence, there's no lead, and it's like, oh, well, this is supernatural. Well, then we have all this again evidence to support that the government does not want that information freely, just out there displayed for all to see. Um, with the Dennis case, when the father went and he did get help. Um, they watched as basically three different, uh, I guess you could say branches of government. It had FBI, CIA, and Green Beret all got involved in this case, and they were not communicating with one another. And the father actually had to find out through the newspaper that uh, other branches of government had been involved outside
Yeah.
of the FBI. He did not even know this, and he said, "Isn't that?" He said that was so bizarre that these all these people are getting involved, and it was some serious involvement, but they're not working together to solve the case. The first thing that happened when the police showed up on the scene is they had him leave the area and go back down the mountain to the station. And his first question was, why in the world are we leaving? Why would we possibly leave when my son disappeared here? We need to search here, now. And they were like, no, we're going to go back down. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. And the situation is that, you know, that if they're trying to lure away from something, and oh, by the way, there was an update about the child. By the way, they have gone through a lot of investigators, and there was one investigator that really brought a bunch of drama to the. Huh?
You're talking about Dennis.
Not Dennis, the other kid. Oh my
Yeah.
bad. I didn't realize you were.
Yeah, so yeah, you're talking about Dior.
Little Dior, yes, Little Dior. Sorry. I got our subject stories confused.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
And, well, with Little Dior's situation, it's been so filled with conflict and such drama that basically the parents were blamed, and the investigator pointed out and said that the parents murdered Little Dior, and they had to hire another investigator. And they just recently, just now here in 2019, passed in 2019, they had a guy come up there with sniff out corpses and stuff like that. Those kind of dogs. His dogs specifically sniff out bodies, and they came across the scent of remains. They haven't said exactly what remains are they, if they're Little Dior's or if it's something else. But 2015, I'm thinking that's Little Dior, possibly. Sadly.
Well, it is possible, and in a way, as strange as it sounds, not knowing is worse than knowing. If my daughter was missing and I had no idea where she was, if I couldn't find her alive, which would be the ideal situation, of course, I would almost prefer to, at least, if the only thing that I could ever know is that she was indeed deceased, I think that I would rather know that than to have no idea where she is. Because especially with a child, when they are missing and nobody has a clue, what is happening, it is left to the imagination. And what we know of, even if we're talking about child trafficking, is such a horrible, just abhorrent, the worst of the worst things that you can imagine happening to a human being, and not knowing whether or not that is what's happening.
Yes.
So, case to find his body would, as strange as it sounds, almost be preferable to having no idea where he's at.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can find that child alive, then great. And bring him back home. Fantastic. But it's hard to imagine, I think,
after this
that,
long,
after long, that they're still safe. And what, if they are still alive, what in God's name is happening to them? So it gets weird, to think of the psychology of that there could come a day where there is a comfort in finding a body just so that you can have that closure. That's our nature. We want closure so much that we just want an answer. And I just can't imagine. I really can't even wrap my mind around it at all. And that's why I wouldn't go to a state park. I mean, I think it was about 2 years ago. Um, my daughter and I and her dad went to Pisgah National Forest for a hike. And it was my daughter's father who introduced me to David Paulides. And we had really gotten into all of it and binge watched everything that he had. And then we go to Pisgah because that's where we wanted to be. That's where I wanted to be. That's where, it was just it's supposed to be a comforting, peaceful place. And the whole time, I'm just like, no, honey, you need to walk in front of me. I didn't want her to walk behind me. And the whole time I was just thinking about this. And I'm like, yeah, this is no longer a place of peace. And it's sad. It's frightening, but it's kind of sad. Because it's like you don't get to have that anymore.
It is. It's really in the cases of these abductions and just it's really hard. It's sad and heartening to see these families with these empty hearts that are losing their children and their family members. And I think it's good.
It happens all the time.
It does.
I mean, people are murdered all of the time, but but it's like, at least it's like if you have an enemy that you can see and touch and feel and name, that's one thing. There's a logic in that. But when it's invisible and you can't touch it and you can't name it and you can't know it, that's a completely different level of fear.
Yes, and the unknown is really strange. The what's out there you don't know, and it's weird. It's strange, and you can't understand it. And that I know definitely that I'm not going to step into a state park at all because unless my family goes there, but I'm going to be watching them closely, and it's going to be hard for me not to want to hike around the state park, but like
And what information that I don't have is, state parks are not, inclusive to the United States or exclusive to the United States. Other countries have, if they're developed, a developed nation would probably have large patches of earth that they dedicated to basically, a state park, essentially what we would call a state park. So is it happening there? Is it happening in Germany? Is it happening in Italy? Is it happening in France? Is it happening in England? Is it happening in Ireland? Is it happening in Canada?
Actually, it is. There's actually been people, I was watching some stuff about Paulides, and Paulides was talking about people that have gone missing in Canada. It is. I've watched so many.
So is it strictly North America?
I don't know. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say because I think Paulides hasn't really. I think Paulides has been mostly investigating in our area, our main area. Like in Canada and the United States.
Well, yeah, I don't have any knowledge of him going international. Aside from Canada. And I mean, that would just be my next question is, if it happens everywhere, then it must be, in a sense, alien.
Yes.
Because aliens would have jurisdiction over any part of Earth that they wanted. If they're really that intelligent and they're really that diverse and they're that capable, then they could be anywhere that they want. But if, and I don't know this, I am actually asking if it's something that is isolated in North America, then that opens up a whole nother line of dialogue about who's doing it. And I know people, again, people who are they're intelligent and professional, people. They've worked for the state. They have doctorates. I mean, people that I have been acquainted with that do believe that the government, our government, has access to certain abilities that we cannot fathom.
Well, yeah,
And there's a lot of, again, there's conspiracy theories, but I don't really like that term. I don't like that term because it makes it seem like you're a crackpot, like to say that someone, well, you're crazy for thinking that. Well, that's just something that's so limiting. You just shut down any dialogue there as soon as you say something's crazy. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times when people say things that do strike you as crazy. I've heard it myself. But in this case, when you're really, there's two types of people in the world, right? Like that whole thing. There's two types of opinions in the world. And one is that you just want to believe something. So your opinion is based on the desire, the desired outcome, whatever is comforting to somebody. And to me, that's not a very strong opinion. And then the other opinion is based on evidence. And so if you really take all of this evidence that Paulides introduces and that he has very carefully, he has really, just combed through the minutia of the details of these cases, the pattern that you see is that there really is no explanation. So at that point, you're at a juncture. You don't know, but you only know one thing, and you know what it isn't, and that a person didn't do it. Because when people commit homicides, there is evidence, there is blood, there is hair, there's clothing fibers, there's footprints, there is a trail that a dog can sniff. And none of those things are present in these cases.
Nope. There's no hair. There's no shoes. There is a empty resonance here of weird and the strange and the paranormal. That I don't know. No, paranormal is the wrong name. That's what is it?
Well, it can, paranormal. It could be. It's supernatural. Is it there? It's something intangible. It's something to us that we can't put our finger on. The only thing there's only two things that we know of for us that can kill a person in that manner, especially in a state park. That is either another person or an animal, like a bear or a mountain lion.
Yeah, and a bear or a mountain lion is going to leave blood. It's going to leave.
You're not going to find a carcass of a person 5 miles away, and completely unhurt with clean shoes on their feet. If it were a person who did it or a bear,
yes,
you're going to find a person who's bitten to shreds, who's been devoured by an animal.
Yeah,
you're going to be to witness this animal grab a person. We're talking about seconds. Literal seconds that a person is there and then they are not there. And that is the pattern in all of these cases. They were there and then they are not. Period. You don't hear them in the distance. They weren't hiding there to scare you. Even if they tried to run away. Even if a 6-year-old tried to run away. A 6-year-old is not going to be able to run away so quickly. Now, why they would want to run away in the middle of the woods anyway, I don't know. I have a child. She would never actively attempt to run away from me in the middle of the woods. She wouldn't do it in a mall, let alone in the woods. But even if a child was so compelled to attempt it, you're going to hear them running.
Well, can I just say something here? Like, say something. Let's say. You know how children can hear some things that adults can't hear? You know what I'm saying? They hear, like, it's like their imaginary friend. They hear their imaginary friend, but it's not their imaginary friend. It's something strange, and you can't hear it, but they can hear it. So,
yes.
I hate to use Evan as an example, but do you mind if I use that as an example?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay, let's say you and Evan are in a state park and she's close to you, but all of a sudden she's hearing this little voice and it's saying, "Come to me, come to me." And she's slowly walking away from you, but you try to grab her, but she's like, "Mommy, mommy, this voice just tell me is like, and you're like, "What voice? There is no voice out here. The only voice you need to listen to is my voice." Wouldn't you say, Krystal, what you would say to her?
Well, if she's told me that she was hearing a voice, I would be immediately very concerned for her. For sure. Very.
And the sad thing about this is, even when they find these kids, in the cases that they find these kids, their memory is wiped. They do not know how they were taken and how they were found. In every case,
Yep.
that Polias mentioned, that every kid. Apparently, the adults have not. There's been adults. By the cases I've listened on him, there is no evidence of adults being found alive. There's some children that have been found alive.
Very, very few of these cases are people actually found alive. Very few.
Like, we would say there's a minute stature of...
Yeah. A minute percentage of people are actually, in these cases, are actually found alive.
Yes. And it's definitely interesting, and we're getting close to our ending time here, but because it's almost 8, getting close to 8. But we'll keep going here. But when it gets closer, we'll be jumping off here. Is that okay with you, Krystal?
Oh yeah, well, 7 to 8, that was the time.
And
I'd like to anybody who is interested in this kind of stuff. If you're feeling skeptical now, that's very understandable. I think typically people should probably be more skeptical than they are. But if you're interested, there's another not so closely related as in that it's a national park disappearance. Anything David Paulides, that's where we've gotten our information from. Anything that you can watch from him is going to be very illuminating. I pretty much guarantee that you're going to be interested by it, at least for a short term. But also, too, when it comes to paranormal or supernatural occurrences, is the Mothman. Now, a lot of people have seen the movie with Richard Gere, Mothman Prophecies. And that was based, and I have to say, pretty closely, compared to the documentary film and to the movie. Not a whole lot was changed, really. Maybe some things, but not as much as is usual. And now it's been a little while. I've watched this documentary myself about 3 times, but the last time was probably several years ago. But on YouTube, it used to be if I searched Mothman documentary, I would get the documentary in 3 parts. So it would say Mothman documentary part 1, part 2, part 3, and I think in total it's about an hour long. It's incredibly fascinating. It really is. It all happened in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, in the 60s. And it really is something. It really is something.
I've heard some things about the Mothman, that apparently right after you see him, apparently disaster will happen.
Yeah, that's part of the story. Yes. But again, it's seemingly at random. I mean, you would think, okay, well, if it happens before a disaster, then where are all the Mothman sightings before 9/11 happened? And I'm right there with you. Why is it happen in remote places? And that's what makes me think that there is an intent behind it, whether it be alien, whether it be spiritual, whether it be government, or all of those things at once. That there is an intention to keep it quiet. It's almost as if whatever force is at work wants to be seen, but only to an extent. And I don't understand why. I couldn't for the life of me give you, I don't even have a theory. I don't have an opinion of why that would be. But it does seem to be. And it's very, very interesting. It goes into a lot of things that I don't think the movie, The Mothman Prophecies, went into. And the details of how many people in that town experienced this thing. It wasn't just one or two people. It was, first it started out as a couple, and then it was 15, and then it was 20, and then it was 30, and then it was 40 people who, in the small town in West Virginia, who were calling the authorities and saying, this is what's going on. And they all shared in this experience. And we're not talking about people who just wanted to make up stories. You don't have a small town all come together over this on a whim. I mean, what that's ridiculous. So it's really, really fascinating. I loved watching it. I thought it was just fascinating. So I definitely suggest that too, if you're at all interested. Any of our viewers are interested in the quote unquote conspiracy theory. It's not even a conspiracy theory. It's just an experience that people had that cannot be explained with orthodox means. And that's okay. It happens. It's okay.
To be honest with you, Krystal, I wish that if I had properly more prepared for this, I have prepared some things. I had thought if there was a possibility to get a hold of Polias, I would love to have him on this show. I
think that would be quite the challenge. He's a very busy, and I imagine sought after man.
Well, he apparently he puts his. Do you have any of his books?
I don't. I haven't read any of his books. I've just watched. I've watched what he has to say. A lot of what he has to say.
Apparently, he puts his email in his books, and I was trying to figure out how to find his email to contact him. I tweeted him on Twitter, and I sent a message on Facebook on the 411 Facebook page. I messaged them, but they haven't responded back to me.
Well, I mean, I would assume that is a lot to expect, but I certainly don't mind attempting to ask him to try to email him or contact him and ask him if he would want to join us sometime.
Yes.
Even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes, just to
talk about the subject we were talking about now. And I want to really share my theory with him and see what now as a professional.
I don't think he's going to. He really does refuse to say what he really thinks. I would imagine that he would say, "Oh yeah, well that's an interesting theory," but I don't think he's going to divulge what he thinks. And I think that's an interesting aspect to him. I mean, I wish that he would come out and say what he thinks, because he's the guy that's been doing all of the research and all of the investigations, and he's the guy with the knowledge. I would love to hear what he had to say.
Yes.
But the fact that he refuses is very interesting. It's very interesting to me that he really does not want to be the person who sways the mind of anybody. He really doesn't want his opinion to affect other people's opinion. He just wants people to be interested, be involved, and have their own feelings, to the point that he won't even say his own feelings. So I kind of respect him for it.
Well, hey, Krystal, I hate to interrupt you. Folks, we reached the end of this podcast, and I want to say thank you so much for watching. This show will be every other Wednesday. 2 weeks
from now. 2 weeks from now, same time.
Same time, same place, and hopefully I figure out how to get my internet working and maybe my OBS tweaked a little bit better. And but yes, not next Wednesday, but the next Wednesday.
Yes, and I would like to hear it from anybody who likes the stuff. I mean, if you don't, that's cool. But if you do, I'd definitely like to hear if anybody else has anything that they have found that is interesting. I would like to watch it. I love to delve into some things that I haven't previously been aware of. So yeah, throw it at us.
Yes. Folks, have a great day. And as always, I'm Tommy NC 2010, diving into the dark, mysterious void that is the great beyond. And this is Krystal.